Welcome back to Bible study to Isaiah chapter 40. We're inching through with Alan Tunn and Ian Bell. Welcome. And we'll go straight in with Alan. If you could read, Alan's going to read and then Ian will pray.
Thanks, Tim. Isaiah chapter 40, starting at verse 21. Have you not known? Have you not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. He brings the princes to nothing. He makes the judges of the earth useless. Scarcely shall they be planted, scarcely shall they be sown, scarcely shall their stock take root in the earth, when he will also blow on them, and they will wither, and the whirlwind will take them away like stubble.
Amen. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for your word, and we would like at this beginning of this Bible study to be quiet before you and to ask you to lead us and to speak to us. We thank you, Lord, that you are a God of love and grace who speaks even though sometimes we are in rebellion against you. We ask your forgiveness if there are things in our hearts which prevent us from hearing you speak. But Lord, as we read your word, as we meditate upon it, help us, Lord, to apply it to our lives, and then, Lord, to live and to walk with you, Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. I should think this will keep us going, these few verses.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you agree. Where do you want to start? I'm going to start with Alan today.
Okay, just a quick reminder. I think towards the beginning of studying Isaiah, I said that because Isaiah has 66 chapters and the Bible has 66 books, some people have likened Isaiah to the backbone, the spine of the Bible, because you can sort of see Isaiah runs through all of the scriptures, and it's the most quoted book in the New Testament, for example. Other people have gone as far as to say, well, each chapter of Isaiah is equivalent to one of the books of the Bible. And so what's fascinating about chapter 40 is it equates to Matthew. So in other words, people have said, there's Isaiah was written by different people. For example, up to chapter 39, the style is so different from chapter 40 onwards. But what that says to me is that the style of chapter 40 onwards is more reflective, say, of the New Testament. Okay, whereas up to now, up to chapter 39, is very reflective of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing in 40 is a change in gear, as it were, a step up, and it's sort of gone into, in figurative terms, don't take it too literally, but in figurative terms, we're entering the New Testament.
Yeah.
We're entering a new covenant, a new thing done by God. And so looking at just these 3 or 4 verses, all right, Isaiah's taking us back to the foundations of the world. And so if I look in Matthew chapter 19, Jesus talks about the beginning. So what I'd like to do is just read out a few verses from Matthew, all right, as a sort of cross-reference to what we've just read, and see what the Lord himself had to say. So reading from Matthew 19, verse 4, and he, Jesus, answered and said to them, have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female? Okay, so Jesus is also referring straight back to the beginning. Both in Isaiah and in Matthew, what the Lord is doing is he's saying there needs to be some kind of contrast between what is here now and how God intended from the beginning.
Yeah.
How did God make the earth? What was the picture of the earth then? What is the picture of the earth today? And do your maths, do a gap analysis of where we are and how God intended it to be. And sometimes we need to do that. Both in the time of Jesus, when he said to the Pharisees that came to challenge him about certain scriptural issues, he said, have you not heard from the beginning? Takes them right back. Isaiah saying exactly the same thing. Because every now and again in our own lives, we need to take stock of how God made the earth and what we've turned it into today.
Yeah.
And that is a very sobering thought. And it's within that context that we should be reading Isaiah 40 and seeing, take stock of where we are now.
Yeah.
What gap there is between God's intention and where we've got ourselves into.
Exactly, and amazing that we're focusing on this subject because it is the issue of our time. You know, the modern world completely rejects that there was a beginning as it's referenced in the scriptures, as Jesus referenced it.
Yes.
You see, there are some who say, oh, well, we just follow the words of Jesus, the red letter edition of the Bible, and we don't bother with anything else. Well, they have to face the fact that Jesus completely identified with and acknowledged the scriptural accounts of Genesis in the beginning, and in particular that of, the creation. He made them, Adam and Eve, male and female, at the beginning. It's very important because it actually sets the scene for the whole moral agenda of our time.
Yeah. That's right. And Jesus was referencing...
Let Ian chip in, but yeah.
Just let me finish this.
Yeah.
So Jesus was referencing humans.
Yeah.
Isaiah was referencing all of creation. And you bring them together and it's a powerful message.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, that was excellent.
Yeah,
excellent.
Same here.
I was listening to what you said with great interest. I think to understand, as it were, the gap theology where we are against where God wants us to be or where we should be, you have to start with our understanding of where we are before God. And in these verses, and I'm notwithstanding the point you're making, which I think will come to. Thank you, thank you. But what it is as you know, you've been told from the beginning, have you not understand from the foundation of the world, he who sits above the great circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers. In other words, what it's actually saying is God is much bigger, wider, greater than you can begin to envisage. Now that is not only a word for those who are unbelievers, it's a word for us as Christians, because there's two, as it were, diametrically opposed errors which are apparent in the church today. There is a God who is out there distant, and as a reaction to that, we make God very personal, almost as though he's a mate, a friend. And sometimes the way we worship God, the way we treat God, does not understand who God is. And I think once we get this into perspective, who God is, then all our theology of life begins to fit into it. And we'll see this later on as we study where it talks about the providential will of God, that God has a plan.
Yeah.
And as a Christian, when we go through difficult times, what we've got to remember is that God is above the earth. God sees everything, time, past, time, future, and he is in charge. And I think, as it were, that is the foundational principle of our relationship with God. We don't want to have a God where he's so out there
So the point you made about the grasshoppers, that gives the impression that he's distant. But then if you counterbalance that with verse 11, it says, he gathers the lambs in his arms.
Absolutely.
So that's the wonderful thing about Isaiah 40. It's so complete.
We tend as people to go to extremes, and we tend to focus on extremes. Either he is wonderful, loving Father who is a mate, and or he's distant and he's sovereign, and either extreme is true, but it, again, as I've said so many times, it has to be held in tension. And if you don't hold in tension, you end up having a bad theology, and it leads to bad worship, and it leads to bad lifestyle.
So coming back to my point.
Okay.
It's a very good point. Very good point. It is, the male and female.
Yeah.
I find it so interesting. The Lord zeroes in on that because it just the Lord set out those gender identities.
Yeah.
It's
Can I
part
just-
of the scriptural basis.
Yeah, can I just sort of say something here?
Yeah, of course
this
you must.
benefit of
And then
you
I'll come back
viewers
to my
and things.
point. Yeah.
No, the way the way Satan attacks society, he starts with language, and that's not original to me.
No.
So many great preachers in the past have said, erosion of language is the beginning of erosion of society. All right? And when I was growing up, there were two words. One word was sex, and you're male or female, and one word was gender, male, masculine, feminine, neuter. Okay? Gender, so like for example, if you studied French or Latin, a table has a gender. Okay? You would call ships a she,
That's right.
all right, or a her, and give female names, feminine names. So gender is feminine or masculine or neuter.
Yeah.
And people can be any gender in the sense that whether you're male or female, irrespective of what sex you are, you can show attributes. You can show masculine attributes. You can show feminine attributes. And you can show neutral attributes. And the prime example is our Lord Jesus Christ himself. He showed all three attributes of gender. He was gender free, but he was a male.
Yeah.
His sex was male.
Yeah.
But by eliminating the use of the word sex, so in the past, you used to have to
Very
fill
good
in
point.
forms.
That's
What
right.
is your sex, male or female?
Yeah.
Nowadays, you look at the same forms and they've changed it to gender. Okay, because they're conflating two completely different ideas.
Yeah.
One idea is that you are born either male or female. There's a dichotomy, and that's biology, and that's the way God created, and
Yeah.
Jesus Christ himself said so.
Yeah.
There's no getting away from. You are born a certain sex.
Except with the gender pool becoming less pure, let's say, you get a situation with the intersex. So that's the one exception.
Let's leave that aside for the
Okay, yeah,
time being,
yeah.
because we're going back
That's
to God's blueprint. God's
That's right,
blueprint
at
was
the
there to be
beginning.
two sexes.
At the beginning.
However, there's nothing to say that boys can't play with dolls or girls
No.
can't play with guns,
No.
okay? Because that is a gender thing. But by conflating the two, you're saying to girls who like playing with guns, why don't you be male? You can't be male, you're female because your sex is
There
female.
was something about dressing up in the clothing of the other sex.
Yes.
So there is something in
There is
Scripture
in
on
the
that.
in the
Yeah.
law of Moses. It says
Yeah.
you shan't do that,
Yeah.
and there's good reason for it.
Okay, finish your point, and then Ian's.
No, I think I have finished my point. I think that it's the erosion of language
Yeah.
was the beginning of the erosion of society.
For me, the point. So the key. What Ian brought in is key. It is that if you can undermine the beginning,
Yes.
you're undermining the gospel. You're
That's right.
undermining the essential element, which is the spiritual nature of man.
And by doing that, you're corrupting the present.
Correct. That's right.
So what is the agenda today where
Yeah.
the agenda with
Well,
regards
it's
to gender?
neutralising, yeah.
What is the agenda today? What are people trying to do? It goes under the guise of being compassionate.
Yes.
That people who are confused about their gender, therefore, to try and be compassionate towards these people, we, as it were, changed our whole understanding of sexuality,
Yeah.
sexuality, male and female. But what is the underlying agenda to people who are trying to push this agenda? I think
I
it
see it
is
as Psalm 2 personally, but yeah.
Go on.
I think it's trying to break free of the shackles that God has imposed.
Yeah, it's to actually,
As they see it, shackles.
I was going to say that. I would say more the framework which God
Yes.
has shown us
Yeah.
in Scripture,
Yeah.
the definite male and female. It is to actually undermine
Yeah.
everything, and it goes back to
So
The whole of our society is being turned upside down, and the way that it's been turned upside down is to attack the home.
yeah,
And the way that they attack the home is you attack, first of all, the whole concept of marriage between a male and a female, as Jesus taught as well. It's not an Old Testament thing. It goes throughout the Bible, including the teaching of Jesus. And secondly, now that they feel they've won that argument, they're moving on to gender. And what the idea behind that is basically to saying what the Bible teaches, that which has underpinned our society for thousands of years, we should ignore. And it is bad teaching. And therefore, once you get rid of that, then they can impose their own teaching. You have to ask what teaching they're going to impose in its place.
So you've used a really important word, which is framework.
Yeah.
And the home is a framework. The gender roles or sex, sex is a framework. There are borders to that. And in Hebrews 11 it says, by the word of his mouth the Lord framed the whole of creation.
Yeah.
And you take away those frames, it's not just one small element that will go or become dysfunctional. The whole thing could start to fall apart in terms of civilization.
That's right. And within that framework, sex relates to identity.
Yes.
Gender relates to characteristics. And by conflating, you're getting rid of the idea of identity. So they're actually robbing you of who you are.
Exactly.
And you're robbing you of who God has made you to be.
Yeah.
It's interesting in Genesis, it's got the creation of man from the dust of the ground, and then the one that the Lord's referring to, this other aspect, which was he created them, male and female, those two, but in his image.
Yes.
So the interesting thing is we are different sexes, as you say, but we are both male and female, created in God's image. So
Absolutely.
the wonderful thing about that one verse is that it's covering equality.
Okay.
It's covering quality, equality, identity, the whole thing, identifying us with our Creator.
We lost the argument. Hopefully
We weren't allowed to engage in it.
We in society we lost the argument with regards to same-sex marriage.
Yeah, but they never allowed us to argue it.
Let me finish the point.
Yes.
I'll probably make the point you're trying to make.
Good.
Okay.
If I let you.
If you let me. Okay. We lost the arguments because we didn't engage or weren't allowed to engage in a biblical way what we understand, because so often we addressed the wrong agenda. And I see the same thing with regards to this whole thing about gender.
Gender roles, yeah.
Gender, immediately we get all caught. I think what you actually said was one of the most helpful things I've heard anyone said, and I think you should write it down and do a blog on Revelation TV blog to help people understand that, have it written down, because what you said is so helpful. But what we tend to find is we tend to attack things like gender roles, and we're actually missing the point. It's not about gender roles. It is some females want to be engineers.
Oh, that type of thing,
So,
of course.
but many Christians are attacking that.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
That aspect, and they're not actually addressing the real issue, as you said. It's one of who we are. It's about identity, and that's the most important point to make.
And as far as identity, I must, admit on behalf of the church, the earthly church, that in the past the church has been guilty, for example, of overstating and going away from the Bible, roles, gender roles in society, by over-preaching, the man being the head of the house and the woman having to obey. I'm not saying it's not scriptural, but I think that it went too far.
Dogmatic, yeah.
In a way which slightly deviated from the Bible, not through what was actually preached, but through what people understood. Yes. So people were left with the impression that the church taught that the man is made in the image of God and the woman was taken from his rib, so she should obey him. That's not what the Bible says. It goes straight back to what you said earlier, Tim, and I'll read it straight out from the Bible. Yeah. Genesis chapter 1, okay? Verse 26 onwards. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. By leaving out the male and female he created them, which Jesus quoted, the church gave the impression that it was the man that was made in the image of God and the woman was there to serve him. That is not true.
Amen.
It is the male and female totality of that male-female unit that is the image of God.
Absolutely.
Not the male.
Absolutely. So important. And then while we're on this, what is implicit in that verse is the spiritual dimension.
Yes.
Because we're created in his image. It doesn't say that of animals. So by, never mind different gender roles and identity that's happening in the modern world, through Darwinianism, they've reduced man to just, something that has emerged from the natural order as a species without spirituality. And what we have in that verse is that spiritual dimension, spiritual responsibility, spiritual vision, eternity. The whole gospel is encapsulated in that.
So if I could sum up what you're saying so that I understand it correctly, what you're actually saying is that each of us have male and female characteristics which are part of the image of God. And and if we want to understand who God is, sometimes we have to look at feminine characteristics as well as masculine characteristics.
That's right.
And I think this would make, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there feeling very uncomfortable at the moment in time because what we're saying...
It can be misunderstood as well.
Because why can it be misunderstood?
Because you said we have male and female characteristics, each of us. Well the danger is that...
Yes, masculine and feminine.
Yes, yeah, that's it.
Masculine and feminine.
And if you look at Jesus himself, it has often been said that he displayed feminine characteristics. He cared. He wept. Those are feminine, in society's terms, feminine characteristics. Okay? But you're absolutely right. Each of us harbors, different characteristics.
Yeah. But if it gets out of balance, then you get the distortions.
Exactly. Yeah. And I fear we've gone too far the other way in the church. We've become far too feminine in our church, and we're ignoring the masculine characteristics of God and leadership and such like. But that's important because it helps us understand this whole argument and not get bogged down in as it were, the superficial. Whether girls shouldn't be playing with Lego bricks or boys shouldn't be playing with dolls or whatever. I think sometimes we do lose the argument because we're mixing up the terminology in our understanding. And it's good to actually understand as well is that to minister in Christ's name, we've got to have a balance between the masculine and the feminine. And that is so important, particularly those of us who seek to minister in Christ's name. We have to have those characteristics which some would characterize more feminine. I mean, some of them are more sensitivity, incisiveness. Yeah. However, what is often needed is directness and leadership as well, which is more masculine as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So what we have in this we've got a whole Bible study in one verse, but
Yeah.
Isaiah is saying, have you not heard? But it's rhetoric, isn't it? I mean, he's saying you have heard
That's
from the
right.
beginning.
That's right.
And that's the interesting thing again. Romans 1, it says, so there may be no excuse. God has revealed himself. People have heard.
It's something that we have a knowledge of inherently, both through nature, our conscience, and the written word. And if you bring all three together, you cannot escape from truth, God's truth, because there's biblical truth, our own conscience, and what we see around us in nature. Because in nature you see, in the animal kingdom, male and female, and they mate and they produce young, and and you can't get away from nature. Then you've got your conscience, and then you've got the Bible, and they all come together. And so again and again, just like Jesus did in Matthew 19, Isaiah did the same thing and referred us back to the beginning. And every now and again, we just need to do that. We just need to go back to Genesis and say, right, okay, all right, what's Isaiah saying? Go back to the beginning. And in comparison to Ian's point earlier, God is so vast that we're like grasshoppers. And scarcely, verse 24, scarcely shall they be planted. He's talking about princes and judges, people who in this world think they're so big and they're so prominent and they're so, important. And there's these important people, God is saying, scarcely shall they be planted, scarcely shall they be sown, scarcely shall their stock take root in the earth, when he will also blow on them and they will wither, and the whirlwind will take them away like stubble. There's no permanence in earthly leadership.
There's an interesting phrase here which we could look past very quickly, but have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? Now that phrase, foundations of the earth, is quite an interesting one. There have been some pictures of the new media center in Spain.
Yeah.
And they've just dug the foundations, and it's been taken months to get that far. Now, if you look at those pictures of the foundations, it looks nothing like the finished article.
That's good.
And if you look at the foundations, nothing like, but the foundations are essential for the finished article. Now, how I understand this when it talks about the foundations of the earth, it's talking about the beginnings of creation, and within this phrase here, it's actually saying, that I believe it's a process, and I have no problems in saying that God created. Now, I know that evolutionists would, condemn me, so don't think that I'm taking the evolutionary side. I believe in what we call.
You make the sentence long enough, no one will know what you're saying.
Good, yeah, that's right. There's lots of commas in there, though. But what I'm saying is that the foundations of the earth refers to a as it were, a pre-state before we reached here, where we are. We look at the earth with its beautiful creations now. The point I'm making is that I have no problems actually seeing that God created the world over a time period, which for me.
But the thing is, we're not God. That's the whole essence of this chapter. So. When we talk about foundations, or we talk about structures, but physical structures, we don't know once you get down to subatomic scales how these forces are working. Because basically a pillar, or it's all about forces. You're an engineer, that even if it's a solid lump of concrete holding a house, there are different forces, and foundations holding it together. And so for a fact, we know it is absolutely miraculous that these forces are held in balance.
The thing is, if I can come back here, the time that Isaiah was writing, sort of 800 BC approximately, there is no way he could know what's under the surface of the earth, except for what he can dig. What man can physically dig, mining copper, mining tin. That's about the extent, salt mines. That's about the extent of man's knowledge. Yeah. All right? But if you actually look at the intricacies of what's under the surface, you've got the Earth's core, which is molten. It's not even solid. Then you've got the magnetic forces, so that you've got the magnetic north, magnetic south, which more or less points to the North Pole and South Pole, but slightly veered. The whole thing is spinning around, right? Then you've got these tectonic plates, and you've got water under. You've got all the minerals and things that man can dig out, and oil. So God's provision in laying the foundation, Isaiah wasn't aware of oil, and yet that's what's running the engine of modern society today. The internal combustion engine all rely on oil. He didn't know any of that, and yet he said prophetically, God was the one who pre-planned everything. Very intricate. We still don't understand everything there is to know about the Earth's core or anything like that. We have some notion, better than Isaiah did, but the more we know, the more astonishing it is of how the whole thing was set up. Just in the way that the International Centre, in Spain, you dig the foundations. Nobody's going to see it afterwards. It's all going to be underneath. And yet it's so essential to supporting the structure. And the whole earth is essential to supporting us today.
Could I ask, while we're absolutely on this point, could you read Psalm 75, the first 3 verses? Because it, for me, absolutely chimes with this, because there's no inevitability about things being stable.
Psalm 75.
Psalm 75, verses 1 to 3.
Okay.
There's no inevitability while you're finding it.
Yeah, you just keep talking.
And the default position is actually instability, not stability.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to read it, Ian?
We give thanks, Psalm 75, verses 1 to 3. We give thanks to you, O God, we give thanks, for your wondrous works declare your name is near. When I choose the proper time, I will judge uprightly. The earth and all its inhabitants are dissolved. I set its pillars firmly.
Yeah. So my version says, when the earth and all its people quake, it is I who hold the pillars firm.
Yeah.
Now, basically, there's no inevitability about the structure of the atom holding together, or the structure of tables and chairs, and even us and molecules holding together. The default position is an amorphous, sort of chaotic mess. But going back to creation, what the 6 days of creation show is order out of chaos. Every day, order out of chaos.
Absolutely.
Order out of chaos. The default position is chaos. So when it says in Psalm 75, when the earth is quaking, it's actually God who brings the order in and stops the chaos. Because, you mentioned about fluidity. An earthquake is basically turning everything fluid. It's only God that puts the foundations in and makes, and that applies both in the physical realm, the structural realm, but also in the spiritual realm. Yeah. It's a wonderful principle.
Yeah.
It's okay. Try it, Ian, first.
Ian,
Okay. And that understanding is within these verses where it says, he who sits above the circle of the earth. Remember, Isaiah, a prophet of God, was a man, and he was living within the understanding of the world in which he was living at that moment in time. And at that time, they believed that if you imagine an upside-down perspex basin, that the world was there, and then you had the firmament where the stars were painted on that firmament. But beyond that, and that's the most important, inside that was God's creation, where there's order. Outside that is chaos. And chaos is constantly trying to break into, as it were, the circle of God. And God, it is God in his grace and strength that is holding out, as it were, the chaos. And incidentally, that is carried through into the teaching of Paul when he's talking about chaos. And a lot of the teaching of Paul has to be understood in the context of, it is the Christian faith that is keeping the chaos from around. That's why he teaches in Romans about, subservience to the rulers, the secular rulers and such like. But the point is this, that the understanding that Isaiah had, and I think it's a biblical understanding. It is God who keeps the chaos out of our lives, and it's God who creates order out of the chaos. The question is, of course, and I know probably people are then is how long did God take to make the foundations?
Right. We'll get on to that. We've got plenty of opportunity. Now you've given us two hints on that. You've trailed it.
A few weeks ago I talked about music. Let's just take a violin, as a musical instrument. In order to, make music with a violin, you use a bow and you sort of draw on the strings, okay? But if you look at the violin itself, the bridge is not glued onto the body, okay? The sound post isn't glued in, it's just held there by tension, okay? The tailpiece isn't glued in, it's just held by tension. And all of it is held by the 4 strings, okay? And the whole thing is held together in such a beautiful manner that you're able to make music that can make you weep.
And subject to the physical laws,
Right.
Yeah.
You change one thing of it, you move the sound post or you twist the bridge around, it'll make a completely different sound.
Yeah.
It's like the world, the intricacies of what's even underneath the surface of the earth, let alone the moon and the stars and everything is held in tension. You change one thing, the whole thing will implode on itself.
Yeah. Right.
One thing.
Right. Now that brings us to the purpose of what we were talking about earlier about gender. What is the objective of those who want to get rid of a Christian understanding of the home and gender and sexuality? What is the purpose? It is to actually create chaos.
Right.
In other words, to reverse creation, to reverse, as it were, the reign of God. In other words, it is satanic. And we've got to understand what is happening in our world in that sense.
So when we use that term, we're mindful of Pastor McConnell, in Belfast. And, we're using it in a theological sense. This isn't hate speech. This is us presenting a biblical understanding. And I say that because the other trend that is in law today is to basically prohibit expressing an idea or a concept which is contrary to the mainstream, and so they've outlawed just about such conversation by saying that it's hate speech. So they're actually trying to prescribe it.
It's love speech.
It's the opposite. And so the reason I'm saying that is just so that we make sure we cover ourselves.
It's because they are theologically ignorant. I mean,
that could be termed hate speech in today's world.
They are theologically ignorant. I mean, people do not understand the theology. I mean, it was like this.
Well, they don't want
this
to.
Debate in the general election with Tim Farron: is homosexuality a sin? Yes, it is a sin.
According to an understanding
of Scripture, but there are all sorts of other. Obesity is a sin.
But just on that point,
evil thoughts.
On that point, there are alternative viewpoints of whether or not it's a sin, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be allowed to express our viewpoint.
Right. Well, we're not expressing our viewpoint. We're expressing what we believe the teaching of the Scripture.
Now, in terms of the modern society, pluralistic society that we're living in, is called a viewpoint. But I totally agree. It's a biblical perspective. But I'm mindful that we're on a public forum here.
Well, let me explain.
With a public audience, so we have to actually fit in with certain legal requirements. But you can explain.
Right. Let me try. Please. Just let me explain it. What I was trying to say is that our understanding of sin is because it goes into people's understanding, ignorant theology of what sin is. Now, sin is falling short of God's standard. Then we have, when we use the term, it is satanic. What we have to look back to is the Scripture where Satan is against the rule of God. and to be against the rule of God is to bring chaos into the world, so then, as it were, it's divide and conquer, so that he can rule. So when we actually say something is satanic, we're actually saying it's advocating the rule of Satan.
That's right.
And we can't legislate as Christians for people who are theologically ignorant and they put into their understanding, their ignorant understanding of what the definition of sin is, what the definition of Satan is. So I go back to say that the agenda of so many people who are against the rule of God, against his word, is to bring chaos where there is order.
But may I just clarify, if Pastor McConnell, within the walls of a church, preaching a sermon, can be prosecuted for using the word satanic, we just have to be careful, as you have been, given that we are publicly broadcast. We just, within the law as it is being framed, where there are thought police out there, there are those who actually are trying to narrow down to one set of so-called British values and say that others are against, civility and society, then we just have to make sure, as Paul did as a Roman citizen, claim our rights under the law and say that we still have a right to free speech.
Yes.
And it is basically saying, look, there is a traditional, biblical, theological view on sin, which is going to stand irrespective of whether someone says it's not in compliance with a view of modern Britain.
Talking about the biblical view, it's a slight aside, going back to what Isaiah said. He uses a couple of terms here. Sometimes he describes a physical entity, in a particular fashion. And sometimes he says like, so he's likening it. So it's quite clear what he's talking about figuratively and what he's talking about literally. And what's interesting is that 800 BC, when you couldn't possibly have known some of the scientific, factual things we currently know, I mentioned the Earth's core and everything, and heavenly bodies and things, he said, have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? Now we know that physically, factually, that there are foundations because there are things under the earth holding other bits of the earth in tension, and you can legitimately call them foundations. And he says, he who sits above the circle of the earth is round. That's a physical fact. Then he goes on to say, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers. So we're not grasshoppers, but we're like grasshoppers.
Which is a brilliant illustration.
He who stretches out the heavens like a curtain. So he doesn't say the heavens are a curtain. The heavens are like a curtain. And spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. So this dome that you're mentioning, Isaiah, in the Spirit, described each element scientifically accurately.
Amazing.
2,500 years before the scientific discoveries were actually made on the earth. All right, to validate what he actually said. So it's like a tent, so he says it's like a tent, but the earth is round, so he says the circle of the earth without saying the word like.
Yes, that is interesting.
And non-Christians accuse Christians of being flat earth people.
That's
right. The Bible doesn't say the earth is flat, never.
No, it doesn't, but there's some that actually use the arguments, and it's become, frankly, being promoted by people on Facebook who are making money. Who don't believe in the scriptures anyway. They're just making money because they get the hits for a nice theory. And so you can go, I'm not encouraging people to go, and check these amazing graphics out, but they're amazingly, in our modern scientific world, we've got a reversion to stuff which is completely cuckoo. But it is that, the circle is just a disc. We haven't got an example of a disc here, you see.
Yeah, and so disc right there.
And founded, of course you can't. If you a disc, and they say, of course, well, it has to be flat because how can you actually have foundations on something that's circular? It's just hanging in space.
Yeah, that's cool.
So all I'm saying is that people, and you were going back to what you said earlier about language. People can come up with this. But the interesting thing is church teaching has actually acknowledged the orb for a very long time, since the very early church. But even that, by the conspiracy theorists, would be used as an argument against it being an orb, because it's part of the conspiracy of, let's say, this, the established church or something. But it's interesting what you say about like a garment, because you've studied the various theories of the universe. Whichever one you look at has it like a stretched out garment, whether it's the parabolic or what they say the positive, universal, or there's even one where the universe is flat. But each one, you could say it's stretched out like a garment. There's another one that's almost like a tunnel. We don't know. To give credit to these astrophysicists, they are actually searching the universe on the basis of it being structured, frankly, and not being disordered. In other words, on the basis of it being designed, because there'd be no scientific discovery unless there was an acknowledgement of design. We just stopped at the first
That's
stage.
right. But the simple point still remains that no scientific discovery since Isaiah has been able to disprove the actual things he said. The actual things
marvelous.
He said.
It's marvelous, and so I personally find it really interesting to listen to these programs. Not necessarily that monkey cage thing, because they're coming from another perspective, but within that, evidence is evidence, facts are facts, laws are laws. The amusement is that there's no reference whatsoever to God. That's the most bemusing part of the whole of the scientific world today, is that they tend to, not want free and open discussion about the elements, the elements of complete dark matter and dark energy. Who is, the unknown God, the plinth to the unknown God. But what is gravity? What is holding and sustaining things, when it's actually been told to us from the beginning? Evolution is another thing, but in terms of the matter, the origin of matter, the structure of matter, I don't think there's much argument. The time scale is an area of argument.
I think the time scale is the piece where Christians get confused, and I understand why. It's because we believe the Bible is the Word of God. And in Genesis, it tells us quite clearly that God created the universe, and presume universes, if you believe in the string theory or whatever. He created them in 6 days, but even today, our understanding of time is changing all the time, and you can, using Einstein's theory of relativity, actually put the whole of creation, 624 hours, into billions of years. Because when you're stretching the universe, time itself gets stretched out. So a second becomes millions of years. And so keeping faith with what the scripture says, you can still believe that God created the universe in billions of years.
And it's interesting they use the term stretch, because all the measurements are saying it is being stretched.
It's
There's an acceleration.
And that's the point. Just like a millimeter would be stretched out to millions of miles over the creation. So time, 1 second at the beginning, or 24 hours in the beginning, would be stretched out to billions of years if you believe in an expanding universe. So I don't see the tension. I can believe there is a consistency. The point being is that God created order out of the chaos. And the theological point that's being put here and in others is that Satan's intention is to recreate chaos out of the order.
That's right.
And that is the underlying plan of many of the things which are going on in our world today, and we have to be aware of the overall plan, and therefore to be able to tackle it. So it is not a trivial thing when people say that there is no such thing as male or female. It's not a trivial
That's
thing,
right.
because it goes right to the foundation of creation and who we are, and that's
right.
brought us right back to the beginning of the Bible study. It's not a trivial thing when it says that to be human is nothing special.
That's right, exactly.
It is not a trivial thing, because then out of that, how did the Holocaust happen? It's when a group of people started to look at the Jewish people and said, they're subhuman. They have no
They're
identity. And once you lose identity, then you can excuse all sorts of sin.
It's the
all
same with
sorts of chaos.
abortion.
Absolutely.
The unborn baby is not human. Is the only justification for abortion.
That's right.
As long as you acknowledge, or the minute you acknowledge that the unborn child is a human being, you've restored its identity.
Its rights.
And once you've restored the identity, there's nothing they can do.
Yeah.
But by denying the identity, it's a fetus.
Yeah.
I know.
Then
But
it's not
shockingly-
murder.
Shockingly,
of course it's murder.
when it's so clear right up to full term.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
the argument is actually about rights, the rights of the woman.
Yeah.
That's right. And that identity goes right back, Ian, to God's order. And Satan is trying to restore the chaos before the creation of man, and God is trying to restore the Eden that he put us in after we created the chaos.
Now we have to, because people will be watching and waiting for us on this issue of death before sin. Because if you have if you basically have man coming after, the trial and error of, however million years of
I don't think
evolution.
I don't think that's
No, I'm
what
just
Ian's
saying we do need to address it, because we talked about time spans.
Yeah.
We've established that that design is basically age neutral. It's either designed or it isn't, and we've concluded that it is, and most scientists conclude that there is this order and design in there. So we've established there's a designer. But on the time frame, to be fair to Christians, they're not nutters, as they have been portrayed. Those who say that and we may not get it all done today, but to those who say that, well, the biblical account is that Adam sinned, and as a consequence of that sin, death came to all men, Romans 5. And so it isn't a small thing to say that there was death before the sin of Adam. We won't get into that because we're in the last couple of minutes, but that's something that we do need to address because it's part of this understanding of God creating according to the biblical account. That Adam and Eve, they were created, God saw that it was good, but what God created was good, and then it's a theological point, the evil came in, what you call the satanic came in, that caused, again, a dysphoria, a disorganization, a chaos, and it also brought in death.
It did. And
so that is a real challenge for those
time,
who see evolution as part of God's creation.
Yeah. It's almost like a viral infection.
Yes.
That as it were, by Adam's disobedience, you had an ordered universe, ordered Eden.
Yeah.
And then this viral infection happened. Yeah. And from that, we have all the chaos.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we'd love to. I can see Alan is absolutely perched on the edge of his seat.
Well, next week, perhaps.
It's great because it just keeps it tantalisingly close, because people will want to know what has Alan got to say next. But isn't it wonderful, just from a couple of verses, have you not heard from the beginning? Well, you've certainly heard from this Bible study, and we're still listening. We don't have all the answers, but we're still seeking. And if you seek, you will find. We look forward to seeing you next week.